Trevor's was my eldest son. He's born with Down syndrome, but a very loving, kind person. Trevor's been gone a year now. So 4 years prior to that, Trevor collapsed with stomach pains, and it turned out that he'd had a big tumour on his liver which had ruptured, and he was transferred from the local East Surrey hospital up to King's College, where he spent 5 or 6 weeks up there, and he had chemo and various other treatments.
My parents' names are Tony and Pat Cowell, and they became very poorly at the same time as each other. My father was diabetic, and he was also diagnosed with a rare form of Parkinson's disease. And my mum had COPD and circulation issues. My father went into hospital and had his right leg amputated. And within 2 months, my mum went into hospital and had the same leg amputated as well, which was quite incredible. You couldn't make it up. And obviously at that point, they weren't able to care for themselves, each other, and their lives completely changed, as did ours.
Hugh was a few years older than me. He managed to make his 70 years and 10. He was a very, very able and intelligent man, quite quiet, quite softly spoken, not someone who would put himself forward. He would just wait for the moment to tell you what actually was the case. At first, Hugh's condition didn't impact very much on his life because he felt he could almost overcome it, in the sense that he wasn't going to be too much limited by it. The condition was in fact a form of Parkinson's, quite an unusual and rather aggressive form known as progressive supranuclear palsy.
When he had a rupture towards the end and he started vomiting blood and that, they took him to the East Surrey Hospital, stabilised him, and they had a room for him down at the hospice. So we went down there. So it was nice that he had his own room, because my husband and myself were able to stay with him day and night, which we did. And they also made the family room available to us. And his family could come any time and be with him in his room. So they were absolutely excellent down there.
My mum's illness progressed quite rapidly, and she was eventually taken into St Richard's Hospital, who were always marvellous, by the way. And she was told that she had very little time to live. She then went into a hospice, which was in Chichester, St Wilfrid's, who were amazing, absolutely amazing. And she still managed to go out in an electric wheelchair and have a cigarette in the garden. But very suddenly died of heart failure. I had to go down to see my dad and tell him, which was probably, if you pick the worst day of your life, that was it. Because I had to leave my mum, who had just died, and then tell my dad that she'd gone.
Something that I had noticed, and I think Hugh was aware of in the last few weeks of his life, was that his balance was deteriorating. And I think probably that was what resulted in the very bad fall that he had, which actually caused him to break his neck, which I guessed almost as soon as I found him, because he was unable to move at all. And so I thought to myself, this must be a spinal injury.
My dad was really unhappy, and I could tell that, but we had a phone call on the 1st of February this year to say that he just died, which was very sudden. My only sort of thoughts around that are, at least he's at peace now, because he had no quality of life, and they're together, because I do believe that.
We did suggest that he might be able to go to the hospice, but the hospice we knew was unable to accept him at that time. And then we said, well, because he doesn't require the type of nursing care that he would need if he were to recover. In other words, it was not difficult to look after him because he was not receiving any treatment, and he wasn't allowed, and he was nil by mouth. We suggested that what he really wanted was to come home, and we asked him if he wanted to come home, and he was able to communicate sufficiently to be quite clear that he did want to come home. And the hospital were absolutely amazing. They facilitated that by getting the necessary equipment and support into the house. And he came home on the Saturday evening and died at lunchtime the following day. with friends and family around him. So the hospital were quite amazingly brilliant in arranging that for us, and we shall appreciate that forever.
When Trevor first came out of King's College Hospital, Denise was contacted and came along, and she worked with us and the doctors, and where Trevor was in residential care supported living, just really to coordinate and make sure Trevor was getting the best treatment, that he was being looked after, and people understood what they should be doing or what needed doing, and Denise was there to help and give advice if they needed it.
If you tried to phone anybody up about it, it was extremely hard to get through to anybody. Bearing in mind we were both working, we would have to take time during the day to do it, so we didn't have time to sit on the phone for hours waiting. But more often than not, we were told, sorry, your social worker's not working today, they don't work Fridays, they're off sick today. And you couldn't actually speak to anyone that was able to answer your questions. Then you've got mum on the phone, distressed because she can't handle it either. And this is the bit I really feel quite strongly about, that it was unnecessary and unfair for us all to be left almost in the wilderness, trying to do our best to carry on with our normal lives and make sure that they were safe.
I haven't actually received support on a professional basis, and I haven't asked for it. My friends and my family have been absolutely amazing, and I've tried my best to carry on my life in a normal sort of way, and I'm quite happy to talk about Hugh, as you will have realised from this interview. I try not to go on about it all the time, but it doesn't bother me if someone mentions him or asks what he would have said. So I've had marvellous support in that way, and I have had communications from the hospice inviting me to go along to group sessions, which so far I haven't needed to do. But I don't know whether I will continue in this buoyant way and march through the grieving process as positively in a few months' time as I am at the moment. But I shan't hesitate to seek for help at that stage if I think I need it.
We had a really good aftercare service from the hospice with counselling and always somebody to talk to. And even a year later, they were still in contact with me and they were still there for me and the family as well.
And I remember they gave us a leaflet on the day that my mum was dying, and it explained exactly what the process was. And that really helped. And they said afterwards, because I gave them that feedback, and they said afterwards, we're never sure whether to do that or not, but for us it gave us something to focus on so that we knew the different stages and what was happening. But it also helped us emotionally as well, if you see what I'm getting at, because you're not given that support otherwise.
By having gone through the process of writing an advanced care plan and an advanced decision, you know in the back of your mind that the time is going to come when end of life happens. In Hugh's case, it certainly wasn't what I expected to happen at that time, but I was ready. And I think it's made an absolutely enormous difference to me, because when we were in the hospital, we didn't have to go through with the medical staff a lot of, we could do this, but we don't think it will necessarily be appropriate. We just didn't have to have those discussions at all. And I think also it has made my period of time in the 6 months since Hugh died very, very much easier, because we both knew that this would come sometime. And I think I know, and perhaps he knew too, that actually it happened for him at the perfect time, because his life was on the cusp of becoming very difficult, very challenging. And of course, his challenges were my challenges too. And so he, I think, has been spared loss of dignity, and I have been spared the pain of watching him deteriorating. And I think that's one of the reasons, because we talked about it, we planned it, and the hospital worked with us so well, that I am as secure as I am today.
What would help would be to have one point of contact for everything. To have a one-stop shop, if you like, where you can phone up and whoever answers the phone has all the information in front of them, so they know who you are, they know who's dealing with what, and they can give you advice.
I think make sure the patients, if you could call them that, the people that are in this situation, are kept aware of all the help that is available, also the families as well.
I just think an acceptance all around that this is a natural part of life, it can be a good thing, but something that should be accepted, and that the person who is dying should be respected to the very end.